Hello once again and welcome to A Matter of Perspective. I'm Judge Derwin Webb coming to you from the Fraser History Museum located in downtown Louisville, Kentucky. Today's guest is my good friend Judge Brian C. Edwards. Judge, welcome to the program.
Appreciate it, Judge Webb.
Man, we've been friends for a long time, and I've told you I wanted to get you on here because you have a very interesting story. And we kind of parallel one another at the same time. I appreciate you being here because you're an inspiration not only to some of the cats that you see wanting to be lawyers, but also to me too, because I probably got into law and stayed here because of some of the things I saw you doing. But before I get to that, let's talk about some of your earliest influence. Who are some of the people that influenced you to be who you are today?
Sure. Well, Judge Webb, thank you for inviting me to be on this. It's a real pleasure getting a chance to chop it up with a fellow judge and a friend who I've known for quite some time. I've had a number of people who have been influential in me being where I'm at. I think you got to start with my family. My father, he was probably, I shouldn't say probably, he was the biggest role model that I had just on the day-to-day, seeing his work ethic and the lessons that he taught me. Other folks that were influential to me, the late Justice William McAnulty was somebody. I've told the story many a time, but I met Justice McAnulty when I was 12 years old. Did not have any idea that one day I would be a judge, but I was in a summer program that my mom put me in because she did not want me spending my entire summer chasing my hoop dreams. So he was the moderator of the program. It was called Your Honor, I Object. We did a mock trial at the end of the summer, and that was my real first introduction to the law. He is somebody who, after that, I followed his career as he rose through the judiciary in Kentucky all the way to the point where he became the first African-American justice on our Supreme Court. And once I became a licensed attorney, he was still serving as a judge here in Kentucky, so I had the privilege of being able to practice in front of him. So it kind of came full circle in a way. He's someone I met at age 12, and then I ended up years later practicing in front of, and he was a mentor to me.
Well, I will tell you this. When I was growing up, I used to watch Good Times all the time.
Okay.
Michael Evans is going to be the next black Supreme Court justice after Thurgood Marshall. Was there a point in time when you had that moment where you thought to yourself, you know what, I think I can do that. I want to be a lawyer too.
I remember I had some teachers along the way, middle school, high school, who kind of threw that seed in my head and said, you might want to think about going to law school one day. I didn't have lawyers in my family. Everybody in my family were educators. I come from a family of teachers. So that was a blessing because it instilled in me the value of learning and the value of education. But I never had any real firsthand, other than the program that I'm just referenced, firsthand experience with what it was like being a lawyer. So when those seeds were planted, I started thinking a little bit more about it. My favorite courses in school were history and social studies. I found out that the pathway that a lot of the great figures in American history and political history were lawyers. So knowing that, having an interest in getting involved in public service in some capacity, I started gravitating down that path of preparing myself for law school.
Well, I know how law school was for me, but I'm not the one being asked the questions. How was law school for you? What were your experiences like?
Law school was no bed of roses for me.
I don't know anyone where there's a bed of roses for anyone, to be honest with you, but at the same time, what were your particular experiences like?
So I'd gone away to do my undergraduate studies outside of Chicago, and I ended up deciding to come back to Kentucky for law school.
Now, you went to Northwestern, right?
I did. I went to Northwestern for undergrad, and I came back to Kentucky, and I went to the University of Kentucky for law school. For me, and I've shared this story with a lot of young folks who are interested in going to law school, who came and shadowed me, or who I've just met in various capacities. For me, and this is an individual thing, I probably would have benefited from some time off between undergraduate school and law school. And the reason being, I just think I was a little bit immature. And so whereas I was able to do well at the undergraduate level without necessarily having the most academic discipline in the world, being able to kind of put things off and catch up at the end, is we know it don't work like that in law school.
Absolutely.
I tell folks all the time, law school is a totally unique academic animal. One test per semester. When you take a bunch of folks that have been vetted and screened, so that means they're already smart, and you're giving them all one test at the end of the semester for their entire grade, one thing you can count on is everybody's going to be ready for that test. And so the person who gets the better grades are going to be the people who, know it a little bit better and can convey it better in the written form. I did not do as well as I should have done my first year of law school, simply because I didn't have the discipline to stay up on things the way I should have throughout the semester. I tried to bring it all home at the end. I learned an invaluable lesson that you can't always do that. So my grades suffered early on in law school. I ended up taking a year off after my first year of law school. Got some real life experience, did a lot of different things, from working at a music store selling CDs and cassettes to selling.
Wait a minute. For the young people out there, what's a cassette?
Right. No 8-tracks. I'm not that old. But so I did that. I sold AAA. I went door to door knocking on people's door, asking if they had AAA auto insurance. And that experience, getting that door slammed in my face a few times, made me think law school is not such a bad thing. So I ended up going back to law school. And when I went back, I think I had a different level of appreciation for the opportunity to go to law school, a different level of maturity. And after going back, my experience was a whole lot better than that first year.
Okay, so you go back to law school. Obviously, you do well. You pass the bar. You decide you want to go into practice. So it's my understanding that you work for the public defender's office.
That's correct.
Okay, tell me about that experience.
Sure. So, it's interesting. I didn't go to law school thinking that I necessarily wanted to be a criminal defense attorney or a public defender. I knew I wanted to do trial work. I wanted to be in the courtroom. But other than that, I did not have any specific path in mind. I ended up, as a law student, getting a summer clerkship at the Department of Public Advocacy in Frankfurt. And I took it. I was working in the Capital Appellate Division, doing work on death penalty cases. And I really, it was a good match for me. I really enjoyed the work. I'm somebody who always felt that whatever I do in life, be it law, banking, whatever, I want to do something where I could actually see the difference that I was making.
Right.
So I enjoyed the work. I really enjoyed the people I was working with. My boss down at DPA also was my trial advocacy teacher in law school, Allison Connolly. And, we had a really, really good relationship. She was a mentor of mine, still is. And she encouraged me to apply to the Jefferson County Public Defender's Office. And it worked out. A lot of things just kind of worked. It worked really well. The woman who I was dating at the time, who is now my wife, she had graduated from law school, was finishing up a clerkship with a federal judge, and had just accepted an offer here in Louisville at a law firm. So I wanted to be where she was at. Applying at the public defender's office, allowed me to do that, and it also allowed me to continue down a path that kind of had been open to me by Allison Connolly and by the folks at DPA. I was fortunate enough to be given an offer, and off I went, started the PD.
Well, I'll tell you this. I know from personal experiences that, because I was a public defender at one time myself over in Indiana, public defenders get a bad rap. Tell me what your experiences were like.
Public defenders do get a bad rap. The joke, anybody who's worked in the system, you hear defendants all the time talk about, I'm going to tell my family to get some money up so they can get me a real lawyer, as if public defenders are fake lawyers.
Right.
So they do get a bad rap. Here's the reality. Are public defenders overworked? Yes, they are. The workload is tremendous. The caseload is high. The stress can be high, and it's not for everyone. But are some of the best legal minds, and the slogan here is the best legal minds money can't buy. But period, some of the best legal minds in the world are at public defenders' offices, not only here in Jefferson County, but around the country.
Right.
These are individuals that are brilliant strategists who are committed towards making sure that due process is afforded to their clients, and who do this for very, very little money. A lot of the folks at those offices, the office here around the country, could make 3, 4, 5 times what they make as public defenders, have turned down opportunities to make a lot more money, and they do it because this is work that they value and that means something to them. So, yes, public defenders do get a bad rap.
So you make that transition, though. You decide that you stay at the public defender's office for a certain amount of time, and you decide you want to go into private practice. What's the difference between that and going into private practice?
Well, in the public defender's office, you don't have to worry about business issues. You don't have to worry about generating business, bringing clients in. There's never a lack of work, and there are never days where you're like, "Ooh, I wish I had some more clients," or "I wish the phone would ring a bit more." In private practice, you have to kind of do a juggling. You want to be a good lawyer. You want to have the skill set that will allow you to be effective. But you also have to be somewhat of a business person, because you can be the most brilliant advocate in the world, the best writer, the best oral advocate. But if you don't bring clients in, then your practice will fail. So you have to figure out a way to market yourself. You have to figure out a way to generate business. So there's a balancing act between the skills that you need to be just a lawyer and the skills that you need to be a business person.
Right. Now, I had an opportunity to see you on TV a few times early in your career. Did extremely well, obviously, as a lawyer. Is there one case that kind of stands out that makes you really proud that you really practiced law before you became a lawyer, before you became a judge, rather?
I had cases that really meant a lot. When I left the PD's office, I started branching out and doing things beyond just criminal defense work. I started doing some civil litigation. I remember once I had an opportunity to represent a family who had a little boy who was in a preschool, a JCPS preschool, and he'd been left on the bus because he fell asleep, and he spent hours by himself in the bus compound. And when when mom came to the bus stop to get her kid, he wasn't there. They said, "Oh, he didn't," and he had been left at the compound where the bus was switching up, and all the kids were supposed to get off and get on another bus. He was 4 or 5 years old and was there for hours. Can you imagine the trauma that brought to that young man? So being able to help her out and get her relief, not only monetary relief, but get her some services, help her get some services in place to help this young fella deal with what he dealt with. That was something that meant a lot to me. I liked that. I had a chance, probably one of the first cases that had some sort of media profile that I was involved with was representing a former state senator who'd gotten himself in a bit of trouble here. He was older at the time, and we were able to work out an arrangement for him that allowed him to accept responsibility in a dignified way, particularly considering his age and physical condition at the time.
Well, I know this. As a judge, you have to give advice while you're on the bench. You become almost a counselor, if you will, to some of the people that come in front of you. Think about some of the things that you learned growing up, or as a lawyer, or even as a judge. What's some of the best advice you think you've received to get you where you are today?
What I keep in mind is that I believe in accountability. People have to be held accountable for their actions. I also believe, and this is something that I think I learned as a child from my family and my parents, that people are not necessarily their actions. I'm sure when you were practicing, people would come up to you, and if they found out you did criminal defense work, "Oh, how do you represent all those bad people? How do you deal with those bad people all the time?" And I try to explain to folks, I say, look, there's a difference between bad people and people who've done bad things. who amongst us has not done something bad before, and they have to, if you do bad things, you have to accept responsibility and you have to be held accountable and there have to be consequences. But should that mark you for your entire life? Should that define who you are? So I think when people understand that, even if I'm having to send them to prison, when people understand that this isn't the end of their story, okay, that they might have to pay some consequences for their actions, but that this isn't where it's going to end, that where it's going to end is going to be up to them because they're going to get out and they're going to have an opportunity. May it be harder for them? Yeah. But they will have a chance to prove that what landed them in front of me is not who they are. So I try to let them know that, try to explain that to them. And hopefully, for at least some of them, it resonates with them.
Well, I'll tell you this. I know that our life kind of parallels one another. And you've done something that I've done as well. You adopted. You have 2 boys. Tell me about what those boys are to you now.
Those boys, they just as I say that, the bad things that people do should not define who they are. Your kids kind of define who you are. Your kids are it's what we do all of this for. So, it's hard for me to reckon back to what I used to do with my time and what I used to do with my energy before we had children. I try to always remember that, we can provide our kids with the best food, the best toys, the best clothes, but the most important thing that we can do is provide them with our time, is to be there for them. So, I keep that in mind, and it's kind of part of the way that I run my courtroom and try to do my job. When I have lawyers who, if we're in trial and a lawyer says, "Judge, is there any way we can recess today at 4:30? I really need to pick up my child or do something," I'm going to do it because I get it, because, that's more important ultimately. We can start tomorrow morning a half hour early if need be, but you need to be there to pick up your kid from school.
Right.
You need to be there to be at your kid's ball game. Do what you got to do. We always have to maintain those priorities.
Well, I'll tell you this. People know you as Judge Edwards. Some call you Lawyer Edwards. You're a soccer dad to me. And tell me about the beautiful game. I hear you always talk about this game that's so beautiful. Tell me about this soccer that you enjoy so much, because I hear you talk about your boys. I know you're a lawyer. I mean, you're a judge. But I hear you talk about the game of soccer, and you just light up like it's the greatest thing ever.
It is.
Tell me why it's that great.
It is. If I were to hit the lottery, Judge Edwards might retire because, I got some plans of things I'd like to do with youth soccer. But let's be clear. I played not a single second of soccer in my life. No, so I'm a true kind of a backseat driver soccer fan. I've learned what I know about it from just watching my boys play. But I really do enjoy the game. A couple things that I love about it is, and this is the case with a lot of sports, but it really resonates with soccer, is one person cannot do it in soccer. When particularly as kids get older, you can take a team that can have the 3 best players on the field. They can be far and away the 3 best. And if the other 8 folks around them aren't holding up their end of the bargain, they will get destroyed by a team of 11 solid players, because that team of 11 solid players is a team. And a team, you play sports, a team really, when it gets down to it, is only as strong as its weakest link. Right. So soccer really, really does, it is a sport that is all about the weakest link, not about the strongest link. And it really teaches teamwork. It really teaches responsibility, because you don't want to be that weak link. If you're that weak link, then your team will suffer. So it teaches those lessons. And, another thing that I've enjoyed about soccer, and why I really am passionate about seeing it exposed to more and more people, particularly young black folk here in Louisville, is soccer is a game that should not be expensive. You need a flat surface and a ball, and that's it. You don't need fancy equipment. You don't need fancy locales. You don't need an indoor facility. Flat surface and a ball and some time and some energy and some kids, and they can play soccer. You don't have to be super tall. You don't have to be super fast. You don't have to be super strong. It is really a sport that a lot of people can do It's just a matter of the willingness, the work ethic, and the desire and opportunity to play it. So, big fan of the beautiful game, man.
Well, maybe I'll have to get involved with it just a little bit more because I think the
on.
beautiful game has a round thing that we call a basketball. But I'll be willing to give soccer a chance for a few minutes.
I will not argue that. I love basketball too.
I'm going to ask you a question out of left field, something getting totally off that subject. So out of left field,
Yeah.
think of a person that you admire, living or dead. Tell me who that person would be that you would like to meet, and why you like to meet that person.
That's a really good question. Let's see. I can give you a living one first. As a musician, we both like music a lot. And just the other day, I was listening to this podcast, and it was Elton John's podcast, and he had on there, he was interviewing Q-Tip. And I am a huge, as you know, Tribe Called Quest fan. Q-Tip is leader of Tribe. And but Q-Tip, he's a contemporary of us age-wise, so some of his life experiences are things that resonate with us. But the music that he put out is the lead guy for what I think is the greatest hip-hop band of all time. The music that he put out there, his just knowledge of music is just fascinating. I'd love to have a chance just to talk to him about things, because he can tell you about everything from Hank Williams to Mozart to Stevie Wonder, and he can just, you name it in music, he is an aficionado on it, and that would be fascinating to have a chance to kind of pick his brain a little bit about music.
What about Dad? What about Dad?
Oh, about Dad. I'm going to go with W.E.B. Du Bois.
Okay.
His lifespan, he went from, his folks, his contemporaries, slavery was not something that was, that they studied in the history books. They were a generation away, so they really knew it. And he grew up in the North, so he didn't personally experience it, but fascinating. Before I went on the bench, I was teaching a Pan-African Studies course at the University of Louisville, and it was an intro course, and in it we talked a bit about Du Bois and his philosophical differences with Booker T. Washington, and there was a fascinating piece in one of the works that we were using where some folks were really being hard on Booker T. Washington, calling him an Uncle Tom, accommodationist, all this stuff. And none other than his biggest philosophical rival, W.B. Du Bois, came to his defense and said, before you criticize that man, you should understand what it feels like to have marks on your back left by the whip of a slave master, because he understands that and you all don't.
Right.
And that was, that was really powerful. And I think it's something that, is relevant to a lot of the vitriol and bitter, mean-spirited debate that we hear in public life right now. These are two men who didn't agree on a lot, didn't agree on the path, but they had a principled respect for one another.
Right.
That was based upon understanding the path this man had walked and respecting that path.
I think it's very interesting that you would pick a person like W.E.B. Du Bois because, he's a very strong member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. And you being a Kappa is very humbling to know that you acknowledge that there are great men of Alpha Phi Alpha that inspire you and that you want to meet.
Even a broken clock is right twice a day. So, yeah.
Question. If you were not a judge, if you weren't a lawyer, what would you do and why would you do it?
I'd be a professor, without question. I'd be teaching. I don't know if it'd be on the collegiate level, but I anticipate it probably would be. When I was coming out of undergrad, I was really torn as to whether or not to go to graduate school and pursue my PhD or whether or not to go to law school. And my favorite professor, funny story, my favorite professor in undergrad, was really trying to steer me towards graduate school. He said, "Don't go to law school. Nobody ever becomes any smarter when they go to law school." And he was a little disappointed when I decided to go to law school.
Right.
But as we discussed a little bit earlier, I spent some time before I went on the bench teaching, and I was a professor at the University of Louisville. And when I accepted that position on the faculty out there, one of the first people I reached out to was that old professor. I said, "Hey, check this out. Look at my EDU email here. That means I'm on the faculty now at U of L. I finally listened to you after 10 years." So, but no, I both my parents were public school teachers. My grandfather was a college professor. Teaching is kind of family business. I teach adjunct at the law school even today, and that would be unquestionably what I'd be doing.
Now, you have a lot of different life experiences right now. What advice would you give your 10-year-old self?
Ooh, 10-year-old self. I love reading now. I loved reading maybe at about 10. Then I went through that window where I became too cool to really read a whole lot. I read what I needed to read to get by. And I wish that I had that time back, could have spent more time really consuming and really appreciating some of the things that my teachers, my professors made us read in school, because that's kind of the way I was looking at it a lot. "Oh, y'all making me read this." These are things that, I've gone back and read some of the books that I probably read the Cliff Notes on in high school. I've gone back and read them now. So I tell my 10-year-old son that, you have a finite amount of time where your only job in the world is to learn. It's a finite period of time, and what a cool thing that is where all you have to really do is to learn, is to build that brain muscle up. Take advantage of it.
Well, I tell you this. I recently watched a TV show, Dave Chappelle, one of my favorite comedians. He received a Lifetime Achievement Award, and when he was talking about it, he basically said, "I'm too young to get this. I can't get a Lifetime Achievement Award at 40-something, but you're still in your 40s. You've been a lawyer. You've been a judge. You've been chief judge. You've achieved a lot. If things were to stop at this point, how would you want people to remember you?" Because I'm not asking you what's next,
Yeah.
because no one knows what's next. I'm not asking about your aspirations. If things were to stop at this point where you just were a judge at this particular spot, how would you want to be remembered?
I know, we've known each other for a while. I know, what sits on your desk in your office, that you're a believer, as am I. And I was just recently reading, it was from Hebrews, and it was just talking about encouragement. And then following up on that was a piece that was talking about somebody, how that scripture moved them. In life, a lot, if we're fortunate and we have folks that can push us, and we have a little something to work with, we seek to do great things. We seek to do extraordinary things, okay? And we try to achieve, as much as we can. But a lot of times, the best lasting legacy that we can leave comes from not our quest and maybe even our achievement of the extraordinary, but is our consistent execution of the ordinary. And when we talk about the ordinary may be simply showing somebody mercy, being kind, offering an encouraging word to somebody that really needs it. Because you never know when that person, you don't know where they're at in their life. And they could be really at that point where they're at the end of the rope. And that one encouraging word that you give them could be what they need to bounce back. And when they bounce back, they could be the person that ends up finding a cure for COVID, finding a cure for cancer, doing all kinds of amazing things in the world. Right. So I want my lasting legacy to be someone who tries each day just to do the ordinary good.
Right.
You know, I fail sometimes. We all do. But I think I have a lot better chance of doing ordinary good every day than of maybe catching lightning in a bottle and doing something extraordinary.
Right.
So I want my lasting legacy to be, he did a lot of ordinary good. He was always somebody who was positive, who demonstrated hope, who encouraged people. And for folks to say, he's the one that encouraged me to keep going when I didn't think I could keep going.
I'll close out by saying something like this. I remember meeting Judge Shobe, and a lot of the things I heard about Judge Shobe was the fact that he was very compassionate, he was fair, and he made every person feel like they were somebody when they were in that court. I've heard the same thing said about you, and I've heard people say that Judge Edwards reminds me of Judge Shobe. Man, I just want to say, as another judge, I admire you.
Wow.
I appreciate all the things that you bring to the bench, and it's an honor to be able to be on the bench with you because you are the epitome of what a judge is. You're fair, you're compassionate, you're fair but firm, and you show mercy to people that actually need mercy in times such as this. So, man, I just want to thank you for being on the show today. I want to thank you for who you are, and I want to ask you to come back. Bring your boys back. Right. Let's talk about things with fathers and sons because, man, I don't know a better man than you. So I appreciate you being here today, and thank you for the opportunity to be on this show. This has been A Matter of Perspective with Judge Derwin Webb. Hope to see you on the next episode.